This is going to be a real quick Edpuzzle because we're just finishing off the lesson. Again, from here on out, I'm probably going to be doing a lot more Edpuzzles. Just with how slow it goes online, this can make it go a little bit faster. You can also go at your own pace versus me taking a lot of time for the people who need time, and then you can go faster through this video if you need to. So we kind of reviewed already, we're actually on this slide. We reviewed already in class what is, of, and what represent, or what they translate to when we are writing our equation. Again, I know we like shortcuts. I know we like to just look at a problem and be like, oh, I'm just going to do this. Because what you're going to see as we do all these questions, you're really going to either be ending up dividing or multiplying. The end math is either, oh, I divided the two numbers, or oh, I multiplied the two numbers. But the way you know how and in which order, because for dividing it matters which is on top, is by writing the equation. So do not skip this step. If you find yourself getting confused, it's because you're skipping this step and just being like, I just am going to do this, and you're getting it wrong. So let's go ahead and go over this again. So the same thing applies. The sentence we looked at before was, what is this percent of a number? Even though the phrasing has changed, the process does not follow the process. So we're going to go from left to right. We're going to drop everything down, write our equation, and then boom, we have an equation to solve. So keeping in mind here, I've got 20 is, now this one's a little bit different. What percent is one thing? The fact that it says percent just tells us what the what is, what our question mark, we'll come back to that, is going to actually be. And then I have of 80, yeah? So 20, we know, is not a percentage, right? So do we do anything to it? Nope. If it's just a plain old number, it gets dropped down, right? Then we have is. What is it is going to become? Equals, right? If I say this is that, these two things are the same, they are equals. Don't go too fast. For some reason, this happens a lot with my students where they get is and of mixed up for what they are, only because I feel like they're two letters each. They're both very small words. And so their brains associate that with what they are. If something is something else, they are equal. Now, what percent, again, focus more on the what. What should our what be? This is the variable, right? Again, the fact that it says what percent just tells us, and gives me a hint here. You can, if you want to write this down, you can. This tells me that my answer is going to represent a percent, which means our answer will come out to be a decimal. When we see percents in the calculator, like if our answer should be a percent, in the calculator, they come out as decimals because that's how we work with percents in a calculator. So if you don't get a decimal or a small decimal for this answer, then you know you did something wrong. So that's our x. What percent? What do we have for of? What does of tell us to do? Of is to multiply. I know it's a little bit weird, but we just have to remember that. Of is multiply. And then we have the 80. So now we have an equation to be solved. And now I know some of you guys might be looking at this and you're like, okay, I know this looks really simple, but how am I solving this? Remember that this is x times 80. Remember the same way we can write this as 20 equals 80x, right? It's the exact same thing. So go ahead and solve it, plug it into your calculator and see what we get. Okay, so we should be dividing by 80, right? If this is 80 times x, divide to get taken away here. So in my calculator, I am doing 20 divided by 80. So I get that x equals 0.25. Now to clear this up real quick, this is the decimal version of our percent. I will go ahead and allow you to leave it like this. However, if you wanted to see what it actually was as a percent, now we should probably know what this is as a percent because we know this one. However, if we divide by 100 to go from a percent to a decimal, we're going to go in reverse and multiply by 100 to get back to a percent. So if I multiply this by 100, this will tell me what the actual percent is. And again, we should know that it's 25%, but sometimes we're not so sure. So either of these answers are okay. I will accept 0.25 or 25%. Do not think, though, that it's 0.25%. that means something very different. That is less than 1%. Yeah, so we gotta be careful. Decimal or percent, don't do both. Okay, so I want you to try this bottom one entirely on your own. Exact same thing, it's the exact same sentence, but think it through. Okay, I'm dropping this down. Is becomes this. What percent becomes this? Of becomes this. Go ahead and give it a shot. Okay, so I have 30 is what percent of 70? So 30 is became equals what percent became our x? Of is multiply, and 70 is just 70. Once again, neither of these numbers are percents, so we don't divide them by 100. Be very careful with that. Okay, but right away here, again, this is x times 70. So to undo that 70, I'm going to divide. And let's see what we get here. 30 divided by 70. Okay, so I am not, we're going to talk about this later. I'm not a huge stickler for rounding. I'm pretty flexible with how you round things, and I'll work that into your homework assignments and tests. So you should get 0.4285. It keeps going, yeah. Typically, because we deal with money in here, we round to 2 decimal places because that's how money looks like, right? $1.53, 2 decimal places. So I'm going to go ahead. This is again 0.428. We're gonna do this lesson at the end just to review it, even though I'm flexible with it. This 8 tells us to round that 2 up to 3. So I'm gonna go ahead and say 0.43. Once again, this is an acceptable answer, or we can multiply by 100 to get back to a percent, which would end up being 43%. Either of these are acceptable answers. Once again, 0.43% is not a correct answer. That's a totally different thing. Okay, we're going to try this one more time with one more different kind of phrasing. But again, if you keep in mind the process, you translate from left to right. It really isn't any different. Don't get caught up with, oh, wait, this phrasing is different than what I've seen before. You know the words. So let's see what we have here. We have 20 is 50% of, once again, the number, what number, just tells us that the what is going to be a number versus the last question, the what was a percent. So just keep that in mind here. We're not going to have to like modify this or anything because our answer is going to be just a number, not a percent. So hopefully we understand that. Let's go ahead and drop this down. Whoops, let's get that out of the way. So 20, does that get changed? Nope, because 20 is just a number, therefore we don't change it. What does is become? Equals. If this is that, they are equals. Now, 50%, I cannot write 50. What are we going to have to do to this 50% in order to use it in our calculator? We're going to need to divide it by 100 and change it to a decimal. Now, again, you probably know what 50% is as a decimal because it's a common decimal that we work with a lot. But it's 0.5 or 0.50. Again, it really is the same thing. So we have to use 0.5, otherwise we will get the wrong answer. Okay, what does of become? Multiply, and what does what number become? X. Again, we don't know. It's some number. 20 is 50% of what number? Now, a couple of you guys may have been able to look ahead and be like, oh, 20 is 50% of what? Well, that's asking 20 is half of what number? So you might already know the answer. But again, we don't want to rely on those strategies to like get us ahead really quick. Because for something like this, like I wouldn't know this, 40 is 15% of what number? I don't know off the top of my head. So go ahead and solve this real quick and we will get our answer. Okay, 0.5 times x. Once again, to clarify, we could rewrite this as 0.5x. It means the exact same thing. So we divide by 0.5. You don't have to rewrite it. I just want to clarify to you guys that that's what that means. Sometimes we forget there's different ways to write equations. Okay, so you should have gotten 40, and that makes sense. 20 is half of what number? Well, 20 is half of 40. But this is how we know for certain when it's something like this, where you probably aren't going to be able to do this off the top of your head as easily. So go ahead and try it, exact same thing. Again, we want to be thinking, okay, I'm dropping down from left to right, and then I solve my equation. Go ahead and try it. Okay, 40 is going to stay put. is equals 15% becomes, hopefully you did this, 0.15. If you put just 15, you got the wrong answer. Of becomes multiply. What number becomes x? So we should be dividing by 0.15. We get x equals. So again, because we normally work with money in this class, I'm going to go ahead and round this like it's money. So I'm going to go 266. We need the whole number, obviously. And then it goes 0.666666. This is going to be 0.67. If you put 0.66, that's okay. Again, like I said, I'm really not a huge stickler for rounding. Probably should be, but I'm not. But I will go over rounding, like I said, as the last lesson in this unit, because I will always round correctly to show you guys, even if I'm more flexible with grading your rounding. I still want to show you, again, how we round. So to wrap this up, what is the very first, just kind of go over one more time, we got all this all down. What is the first step when we see a percent? We see a percent and immediately we go, oh, I promised to Miss Holberg that I would do what? We would take it and divide it by 100 to get it to a decimal. Divide it by 100 to get a decimal. Immediately, again, it literally does not matter the context or what question it is. If you're reading a huge paragraph and you see a percent, you might want to go, oh, before I continue reading, divide by 100, get the decimal off to the side, okay, good, and go on. And then to review once more, what does is become? Is equal. So if you didn't write this down yesterday because you didn't have the packets or for whatever reason, definitely gonna want it right now. If this is that, they are equal. Of means to multiply. Of is how I keep saying it because it comes up so often. Of means to multiply. And if it's what, we don't know what it is, so it is a variable, it's x. Okay, now from here, the last thing I wanted you guys to do, you should have picked up a journal from the front, for Pete's sake, from the main office as well, from school. If you did not, again, you're gonna want to, you may save this on for your own time. Let me go ahead and see if I can pull it up here. But this is what the journal looks like. So it's just a couple pages, it's like 6 pages or so. This is where I had you write the letter to yourself. So if you haven't gotten a chance to do that, because again, this journal is my gift to you. You're going to fill it out throughout the semester, and then you're going to take it with you after you graduate, and it's going to have lots of good information for your financial life, which is really your real adult life. So if you haven't had a chance yet to write that letter to yourself, you'll be able to write it right here on the front page of the journal. Every so often, we're going to have a couple, it's not every lesson, but in a couple lessons, we're going to be writing some important facts, giving you some time to think about how this applies to yourself as well. So every now and then I will say, okay, how do we go about answering these questions? So in your journal, if you have the packet, I would like you to go there. You can take a moment, you can pause the video, get your journal out. Again, this is the front page, yeah? We're going to answer these 2 questions in the prerequisite unit because this is all there is. So we answered this from P1a, but go ahead and look back to P1a. This is at the very end of that lesson. Fill in the blank. A percent is blank to what it is of. What did we say? A percent is blank to what it is of. This is in your notes from yesterday. This is relative. So if you want to fill that in right there, this is relative. What it means is it's dependent on. How much a percent actually represents is dependent on what it is of. Now, I want you to describe what this means in your own words, perhaps by using an example. So again, we talked about this a lot yesterday. The fact that, again, which is something you can say, is, oh, I have 8%, oh, you have 2%. Well, that doesn't give us enough information, yeah? So go ahead and kind of write a sentence about what information we need to know in order to actually find what the percent really is, how much money is usually the case, right? So go ahead and write a sentence so that you understand that connection. Now, now you have that, for this next thing here, we're going to talk about this. So let's go ahead and come back to the notes. A tipping trick, because again, we're talking about percents here and finding percents, calculating percents. In your real life, there are going to be many situations where you should be tipping. Obviously, eating out at a restaurant is the biggest one, but getting a haircut, you should be tipping your hairstylist. If you use a valet, if you don't know what a valet is, they park your car for you at fancy restaurants and other places too. And you should be giving them a tip. Yeah, of course, they're paid hourly, but it's usually not a ton. Now, a good rule of thumb is, do we know how much we should be tipping? 20% actually, coming from someone who was a server and a bartender before I became a teacher. 15% is okay, but 20% really you should be tipping. Some people get nervous though, and you're not sure. I've had friends who are like, I'm just gonna guess, is this enough? And I'm like, you just tipped 70%. Do you want to do that? Or no, you tipped 2% of your bill. You are garbage. There's my server side coming out. You can tell how I feel about people who tip very slow. So here's a trick. You go out to eat and your bill ends up being $48.65. What did you tip based on the above recommendation? Now, again, you can always pull out a calculator and find the percentage. However, here's what I do. I usually take my dollar amount and I round up to the next whole 10 amount. So this is $48.65. I would round this up to 50. So I would round up to 50. And then it's actually very easy to find 20% of 50. The reason why is there's a trick for finding 10% of 50, and then we can double it. 10% of 50 is I'm going to go ahead and write this. 10% of 50 means that we're going to take the decimal on 50 and move it one number to the inside, which means to the left. So here's my decimal. I would move it here so that now, I'm going to move this out of the way. Now I have 5.0 technically, but that 0 doesn't really matter. So this is 10% of 50. That should make sense. I have, if I multiplied that by 10, I would get back to 50. So if that's 10%, to get 20% of 50, I can take that 10%, which was 5, and multiply it by 2. So my tip would be $10. Now, that's a little bit higher than 20%, of course, because I'm rounding up to $48.65, but a little bit more than 20% is not going to harm anyone. Obviously, your server would be very happy, and it's really easy. I go $48.65, okay, it's 50, 10% is 5, multiply it by 2, you're good to go. So try it one more time. What if your bill was $31.72? Now, again, because 20% is a very good tip and 15 is decent as well, it's okay if we round down. So typically, I would round to the nearest. So if this is $31.72, what nearest tens number, like again, 50, 60, 70, those are all tens numbers, would I round this to? We can round this to 30. So I would round to 30. So again, it's going to be a little bit less than 20%, but it's not going to be a major thing. And then we're going to do the trick to find 10% of 30. So again, take 30, move the decimal in 1. What should we get? Well, 30, here's my decimal, right? The decimal is always at the back. I'm going to bump it over 1, and that's where my decimal is going to go now. So 10% of 30 is 3. Again, really what happens is that 0 just gets chopped off. It's a nice, easy trick. So 20% of 30 is then double that. So what should we get? Well, 3 is 10%, and I want 20%, so times 2. So you would tip $6. Again, that's a really simple trick if you're not confident with tipping. 20% is really easy to tip off of because it's very easy to calculate in your head. So what I want you to do now is go back to your journal to wrap up this Edpuzzle, and I want you to finish off by describing this trick. And if you want to use a separate example yourself, you can. Okay, once you finish that, we're going to go ahead and come on back to our lesson. And we're going to be working in our homework groups. I'm going to be talking about that when you get back on our first assignment.